All right. How did I get a thumbs up already? I didn't even start yet. How can we have a thumbs up, a thumbs down, and we haven't even started yet? What up, y'all? How's everybody doing? We're talking MCAT Overwhelm tonight. If this is your first time joining us, I'm Dr. Andre Pinesett. I'm the study doc. And tonight we're talking about MCAT Overwhelm. And I'm going to lay out some very simple strategies for overcoming the most common complaints of overwhelm I get from students, work with students. So it's going to be a fun night. If you are overwhelmed, if you are stressed out about the MCAT, comment right now. Let me know what you're worried about in the MCAT. Let me know what you're struggling with the MCAT, and we can talk about it tonight. Marlena, what up? So let's hit the intro, and then we will get going, y'all. But stop making excuses. Stop whining. Stop, right? Get at it. No excuses. Just dominate. Utham's in the building. What up? Okay, so we're going to talk MCAT tonight. I'm Dr. Andre Pines. If you guys don't know, I have a website. It's thestudydoc.com. THESTUDY doc.com. And I have an MCAT course that's incredible. It's called How to Dominate the MCAT Without an Expensive Prep Class. And it's awesome. And after this video, I'm going to be putting a flash discount link in the box description below for you guys to get $100 off of that course. So check that out if you're looking for MCAT prep to help with your MCAT. Let's see if I can pull my iPad up again. Can everybody see me? Can everybody see my iPad? How many fingers am I holding up? Can we see me? Vivek is ready. So, Hale, I got your email. Yes, when you come out to San Diego, come through. I don't know if you can shadow because the COVID's about to pop off with this Indian varietal. I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but this India got this double variant that's jacking people up. But yeah, so you can definitely come through. We can meet when you're in San Diego. Okay, Melena says worried about, so I'm gonna put this here. Why am I hearing? All right, everybody can still hear me? What's overwhelming to you guys about the MCAT? Yeah, so hell, I'm definitely gonna put my address here in the box for everybody. I'll reply to you email. Okay, so Melena says test day freak out. Okay, that's reasonable. Test day freak out. That happens. Actually, it happened last week. I had a student call me Friday night before their Saturday exam and say, "Oh my gosh, Dr. Pinesett, I'm just freaking myself out. The test is tomorrow, and oh my gosh, I know I've been studying. I know my exam practice scores have been here, but I'm freaking out because it's tomorrow. And what happens if I just forget everything?" I'm like, "How are you gonna forget everything all of a sudden, right? Day of the test. You've studied, you put the work in, you're gonna be successful." And so, test day freak out is definitely one of the things that we hear about, right? Brianna says the amount of information. Okay, Taylor says how to actually study. Kasim is hitting it on the mark. One of my students talking about consistent and persistent to the game, yo. Because that is key, right? Consistency, being persistent. We're going to talk about this because it's very, very, very important for this MCAT. So lots of reasons. If you guys have other reasons why you are worried about the MCAT, why you gotta get overrun with the MCAT, put them in the box and we'll talk about those as well. But we'll start with those. And so the reason this would be a great topic to talk about, right? We did stress last week. If you guys missed that, we talked about generalized stress, where it comes from, and how we can attack stress. But the MCAT is a whole nother thing, right? A lot of times we stress ourselves out for no reason, but the MCAT is definitely something to be stressed out about. It's definitely something to be worried and concerned about because it is an absolute monster of an exam. I look at it as a cumulative exam for the 4 years of college. And we all know how difficult, right, the cumulative exam is. But now imagine, right, ramping that up, and now you have a 4-year cumulative exam. So all that material, all that content, so it's a huge volume of information, but then that information also spans several different areas, and so there's lots on the test, right? And Jessica also brought up that it's a critical thinking exam, so it's also that critical thinking part of the exam. And many of you guys are not critical thinkers, so that freaks you out as well. So we got all these things and reasons we should be freaked out. So that's how difficult the test is. So then the other reason we freak out is because this test is a major determinant in the medical school admissions process. So if we want to go to a top school, we know the numbers matter. Anyone who tells you numbers don't matter is lying to you. The MCAT number matters. Particularly, actually, let me take a second and clear this up right now. How many of you guys have heard, right, it's 2021, in this past cycle, the 2020-2021 cycle, that schools were either going to let you apply without the MCAT or they were going to downgrade the MCAT's importance, right? And many of you guys are thinking, oh my gosh, same thing this upcoming cycle, 2021 is going to be crazy, so they're going to be a little lenient with the MCAT. And what I want to clarify, because I think it's a super important point, is that while schools are saying that they won't discount, so some schools are saying, listen, if you don't have an MCAT, we won't count it against you. Or if you're, right, they're saying that to you. It's very important that you understand that just because they're not requiring the MCAT doesn't mean that you will be more competitive without an MCAT. The people who benefit from not needing an MCAT are the people who took care of business with their GPA. So if you don't have a stellar GPA, don't anticipate that a medical school is going to admit you without an MCAT, because you will have question marks about you. Does that make sense to everybody? Additionally, too many people thought, oh, wait a minute, they're going to count the MCAT as less, or they don't care if we have an MCAT. My MCAT is low, they're not going to care, so I'm going to go ahead and apply. That's also not true. If you have an MCAT score on the books, they're going to look at it. So what you have to do is make sure that you have a competent, competitive MCAT score when you apply. So, okay, so everybody, I thought that we should put that out there because people have been messaging me about this, the confusion about this, like, oh yeah, I'm going to apply, I don't have an MCAT yet, or my MCAT sucks, but they don't care this year, so I'm just going to apply, and I'm going to get in. And that's not accurate. If you guys understand what I'm saying, like the video right now, let me know we're on track. And that was some vital information for some of you characters who thought you were going to try to sneak into medical school with a bootleg MCAT. So, right, so that's why the MCAT's overwhelming. A lot riding on it, and it's a huge exam. And so, just how overwhelming can the MCAT be? It can lead to this paralysis. And I tell my students in my MCAT course a story about a student, right? And one of the things that I say about the MCAT, before I tell you how overwhelming it can be, is that the MCAT is a mental fortitude exam. One of the biggest aspects of the MCAT is overcoming the mental roadblocks that either we establish for ourselves or that are accurate and are true that we're worried about, but it's us psyching ourselves out. It's the test and the studying that's required wearing us down and us mentally not being strong enough to push through and succeed. So what we have to recognize is that the mental aspect of the MCAT is huge, and the literature shows and supports that when students are mentally defeated, their test scores will be lower. And the reason their test scores are lower is not just a test day freak out thing, as someone was mentioning earlier, but it's also because that defeatist attitude, when you feel beat down, when you feel overwhelmed, when you feel that hopeless sensation we were talking about last week, you actually shut the brain down. And true story, you cannot achieve what you do not believe. You will not put the effort in. So people who don't believe in themselves, who don't have the mental fortitude, people who are discouraged will study less, will not tolerate getting questions wrong. How many of you guys struggle when you miss questions, you doubt yourself, right? You guys will not stick to it. You guys will not be consistent. You will not be motivated. You will not be energized. You will not be engaged. All of these things the research tracks with. So we have to make sure we're mentally engaged and locked in if we're going to conquer the MCAT. So this is an important subject, this mental fortitude for this. And when we talk about this mental fortitude and building this, I like that word fortitude because you can think of it as a fort around your brain. And I'm an artiste, if you guys didn't know this. This is your brain tissue, right? And this is a fort that's secured. Can't come in here, right? There's a fort there, right? So that you can fortify your brain against all the things on the outside. And so for you guys, you have to fortify yourself. If you're not fortified, it's easy for us to sabotage and thwart ourselves in the process. And I had a student that I talk about a lot. It wasn't one of my students. It was a girl I knew way back when I was just a young anteater at UC Irvine, just a young anteater, right, trying to do my thing. And this woman was older than me. So when I was a sophomore in college, she actually was a senior. She had already graduated, and she was actually going off, right, to focus on her MCAT and then apply to medical school. And at the time, she was saying how, yeah, you know, I was supposed to take the MCAT during my junior year, but I got busy, so I pushed it back to after my senior year, so I got time to focus on it. I'm like, well, that's great. So you're gonna spend the summer, you're gonna focus, you're gonna take it in September. She's like, yeah. And we stayed in touch. And year after year, this student never took the MCAT because she was scared to fail it. So she went and did a master's program. She went and did this, and she went and did everything except take this MCAT because she was so freaked out about it. And you fast forward now, 20 something odd years later, whatever it was, right? When I was young, I was a young person. You fast forward this past year, I had a student who I talked to last year about the fact that the only thing stopping them from getting into medical school was the MCAT. And I said, listen, focus on the MCAT, get the MCAT done, study on the MCAT. Fast forward a year later, we're talking this year, right? 20 years after this girl was too afraid to take the MCAT to go to medical school, and she actually never ended up going to medical school. But my student spent the entire year doing everything except studying for the MCAT. And when I yelled at him, he admitted, right? He said, you know what? Actually, I just been freaked out about it. I've been too stressed out about it. I've been too worried about it. I've been too overwhelmed by it to actually sit down and study. So it was easier for me just to avoid it and do everything else. And for a lot of you guys, you're in that boat. And what's crazy is a lot of you guys are in that boat before the MCAT where you keep pushing it down the road, pushing it down the road. But some of you guys are actually in your MCAT study period. You're trying to study for the MCAT right now, but you're practicing avoidance behaviors, right? Yeah, oh God, I did my MCAT studying. And you're pushing your studying away, and so you're not putting in the time you need to be successful on the MCAT. So we have to fortify ourselves. And the way to do this is very simple, guys. The very first step, if we are going to stave off overwhelm, is understanding, right? We have to first identify what our stressors are, what our issues are, what are the points of anxiety and overwhelm. And if we identify something, right, we can't, it's like trying to hit a target. You can't hit a target, right, if you don't know what you're looking for, right? If there's a big old bear in the woods, you're not looking for it, you can't go hit that target. We can't make moves to not get eaten by the bear. And so we have to identify what our potential stressors are. And there are a lot of general stressors that are out there. We're going to talk about some. But for some of you guys, you have particular issues that could lead you to be overwhelmed. You have particular specific things that are worrisome to you. And when I talk about this identifying obstacles and things that overwhelm us, one of the big ones, and again, I was talking about a student about this a couple weeks ago, is accommodations. So what's interesting to me is that students, and this is the conversation I had with a student a couple weeks ago, because I mentioned that you shouldn't bring up your disability in your med school application unless it's to tell them a story about how you succeeded in spite of a disability. But just to complain about your disability doesn't help you. And so this student took that and interpreted it as, oh, I shouldn't apply for accommodation on the MCAT because I don't feel I have a disability. But for my students who have disabilities, whether it's a learning disability, whether it's a health disability, whatever it is, right? It's very important that you don't let your disability stop you from being successful. And from working with tons of students with disabilities, both through the MCAT and also their other courses and studying, it's very important to understand that if you have a real disability, you are entitled to real accommodations, and those real accommodations will make a real difference in your score. And if you fail to get accommodations, you're failing yourself. And the number one reason that students don't get accommodations is not because they don't try for them, it's because they wait, start studying for the MCAT, right? They're, oh, I'm 3 months out from my MCAT, 4 months out from my MCAT, I'm starting studying for the MCAT. Study for the MCAT. 2 months go by, 3 months go by. Now it's the month before the exam, and they say to themselves, oh my gosh, my studying's not going well. I'm not finishing sections. I'm losing focus. Oh my gosh, my disability is a problem. I need accommodations. And then they apply for accommodations a month or 2 months before the MCAT and are unable to be accommodated before test day. So what was the breakdown, guys? The breakdown was in failing to identify a potential obstacle that would lead to overwhelm. They feel overwhelmed because they don't have the time they need, because they don't have the accommodation they need. And if they would have just sat down and said, wait a minute, what are the issues I face? What are the potential spots for overwhelm? They could have identified it early and applied for accommodations and gotten accommodations. And I mentioned recently I had a student, learning disabled, go from close to a 490, right in the 490 range, get a 523 on her MCAT simply because she put in the work, right? And she foresaw that her disability was a potential source of overwhelm for her and anxiety. And so she got it under control. She had multiple things that she was doing in addition to accommodations to optimize her disability and make herself successful. And so for you guys, recognizing what your obstacles are and then fixing them is super important. So the first thing is to identify potential obstacles to you being successful. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? That's number one. Okay, we have to identify. The second thing is once we identify, we must have a plan for overcoming them. So I mentioned my student has a disability, so they make a plan. They go and they apply for accommodations. I actually have another student who's applying for, like I said, I work with a lot of students with learning disabilities. And I have another student with learning disability and is applying for accommodations. And so it was cool because we were corresponding, putting her letter together, her packet together to the AAMC to get these accommodations. And it was so great because she was so organized. She had the documentation. She even got her professor to write her letter of recommendation. In the end, we decided not to submit it, but she had a professor letter. She had all this material, so she had a plan together to get her accommodations. So sometimes we identify obstacles and then we just try to psych ourselves out like, oh, that's not a problem. And I think it's from this whole thing of fake it till you make it, right? Like, oh, I got a problem. Oh, I'm just gonna push through. No, we've got to, once we identify a potential obstacle, we've got to make a plan for overcoming that obstacle. Okay. Josie said, what kind of things qualify for receiving accommodations? Josie, if you've ever received accommodations in college, for the simple way to see if you're eligible for an accommodation is if you have ever received accommodations from your university, you should be entitled to accommodation on the MCAT. Does everybody understand what I just said? This is important. So Jody said, what kind of things qualify? All sorts of things. But the simple test is if you've ever received accommodations in your academic career, you should be eligible for accommodations for the MCAT. Some of you guys have issues. You have not been diagnosed. You have never received accommodations. Now's the time, this moment, I don't care how young you are, get diagnosed. That way you can get accommodations starting right now for your classes, improve your GPA, and then you'll be set up to get surefire accommodations for the MCAT and maximize your MCAT score. There are too many students who are ashamed to have a disability, right? Who just think that their struggles are just happening. Go get assessed. A lot of universities offer some sort of free testing. It's not official, but they can put you in the ballpark so that you can go get a more formal diagnosis. But take care of that. And I'm glad it's actually coming up because, and it's the truth. And you guys can comment on here if you feel comfortable. But how many of you guys on here right now have a learning disability? How many of you guys on here right now receive accommodations? How many of you guys think you have a learning disability and think you need accommodations? Right? On this channel, I talk about not normalizing something, okay? Having learning disabilities is something that's a normal, natural process. People have them. But what we need to normalize is not doing nothing about them, not feeling hopeless. We need to intervene. So we want to encourage people to speak out about their disabilities such that they can go get the help they need to level the playing field to be successful. Thank you, Brianna, for saying something. I appreciate that. Okay? And Calvin, no, the assessment will not hold you back, guys. No one will hold it against you. I went to Stanford Medical School, right? And we had several students, who needed accommodations. There's no big deal. All right? This is what it is. I tutored one of our students who had a learning disability during medical school. Right? And I appreciate you still being honest, right? There's a lot of people. Thank you guys for being honest, right? We are here, right? This is about positivity, productivity, and perspective. So we are positive in this, but we're going to have a perspective and we're going to do something about this. And what I love seeing are students with disability thrive because they're taking care of it. They're not just sitting back and saying, oh, I'm just going to suffer through it silently. Speak out, get the help you need, and be active with it. I appreciate you guys sharing all that stuff. There's a lot of good stuff in the box right now. So if you guys have these learning disabilities, if you have these issues, let us know, let the group know, because there's people out here who are scared to speak out. They think they're the only ones and they have to suffer in silence. There's nothing to be ashamed about. There's tons of medical students, tons of doctors who need accommodations. I actually work with some residents who have needed accommodations through their residency to be successful. So don't worry about that stuff, okay? So we talk about forming a plan. And when we talk about a plan, we want to break it into two folds, A and B and C. Okay? Excuse me, A and B. The first one is prevention, and the second one is intervention. The only sure thing in life is that there is no sure thing, right? So when we say we have an obstacle that may cause us stress, that may make us overwhelmed, right? And when we talk about overwhelm, I guess you should go back and put this out there. I like supply demand curves because they're very simple to understand, okay? We feel overwhelmed when the demand of our duties, of our lives, of our obligations exceed our capability to handle them. So over here is the land of overwhelm. Here's the land of confidence. Okay? This discrepancy here creates overwhelm. So when we are looking at overwhelm, we want to identify potential areas where the demand would exceed our supply. We want to look for triggers, identify things, and then we want to have a prevention plan and an intervention plan. And the reason we need to have two of these is because our best laid plans, we say, oh, listen, I'm not going to get overwhelmed because I'm going to do these things. I'm not going to fall into this trap because I'm doing these things. Our best laid plans, we're going to have stumbles. We're going to have setbacks. We're going to have unexpected occurrences. So we must have both a prevention plan and an intervention plan. Because when we do start to feel a little stressed, when we do start to feel our shoulders getting tight and that anxiety rising up in us, and we want to push away from the book, what do we do to intervene in that moment to push that away? Let me see what Kasim said here in the box. People are agreeing with Kasim. Let me see. Yeah, graphs. Good job. All right, Calvin's going to call for accommodations tomorrow. I like it. I love it. Night Lion says in the process of being formally diagnosed. Awesome. Yeah, so don't feel ashamed, guys, for that stuff, okay? So we need a prevention and we need an intervention. Both of these parts of the plans, okay? As we do this and we talk about a plan, a lot of you guys say, I have a plan. When in actuality, what you have is a hope or a wish. What's the difference between a hope and a wish and a plan? Patrice, I love it. It's action. So many people say, I hope it goes well. I wish it goes well. I hope I don't get anxious. I hope I can study. I hope my score improves. I hope I'm doing the right things. Then we have the next classification, which is a goal, right? And this is the smart thing, specific, measurable, whatever. You have a goal. Oh, I want to get a 520 MCAT score. And you're going to study hard. Well, studying hard is a goal. I'm going to study smart. That's a goal. I'm going to study well. That's a goal. What we need is a plan. And as, what was it? Who said it? Patrice said, it's action. So a plan is mechanistic, meaning there's a mechanism to it, and it's action oriented. So if we don't have action, right, the actions, the mechanics of it, the mechanistic nature of it, the steps we're taking to achieve the goal, then we're just a goal. And even worse, we're a hope and a wish. And so what we want is a plan of execution that has mechanisms that we can execute. Does that make sense to everybody? And Julian, we're going to get there. So then the third part, right? We create a plan. We must execute on that plan. We must execute. Okay? We must execute. And for the MCAT, right? That execution is so key. And this is when that mental fortitude kicks in, is that the biggest reason, like I said, the biggest reason that students don't score up to their potential. And believe me when I say this, guys, any student, I could, not a monkey necessarily, but I could teach who we would call the dumbest student, the least academically, intellectually challenged, or intellectually gifted student, how to get a top MCAT score. Any student, if you're out there listening right now, any student in this world, no matter where you come from, no matter what you suffer from, no matter what your experiences have been, anyone can get a top MCAT score. But the separator between people who score below their true potential and people who exceed, right, who maximize their potential and get that top score are people who execute. Does feel what I'm saying? A lot of people tell themselves, oh, I can't get a top score. Oh, I can't get a top score. Any student can get an amazing score and maximize their score. And as I say that, I also want to say this. Life's a big bell curve. Some of us, right, are over here on the bell curve, and that's okay. So as you guys go into the MCAT, understand that what is a score goal for some of you is a different score goal for other people. And it's important to have your own personalized score goal that's realistic for you, that stretches you, but that doesn't put you in a situation where you're instantly going to fail. So if your baseline MCAT exam score is a 485, for you to go 523, that's very difficult to do. You could do it, but if this is the only way you win, it makes it a very stressful process. We want to start our goals reasonable and work as hard as we can, as well as we can to get there. All right, but we have to execute. So we identify, we plan, and we execute. A couple of the simplest things you guys can do to avoid overwhelming the MCAT and maximize your score, we're going to cover them right now. Everybody have any questions so far about what we've covered? Are people learning? Is this a nice discussion? Yeah, Kasim, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Right? I encourage people. I say, listen, anybody can score well in the MCAT, and someone thumbs down the video in that moment. It's weird, right? People are allergic to that positivity. It hurts their feelings because they're telling themselves inside right now that they can't get a great score. So when I say you can get a great score, it hurts them to hear that. So they thumbs down the video. Do you guys, it's that dissonance. They can't, wait a minute, he's saying I get a great score. I can't get a great score. Thumbs down. That's how they feel inside. Holding themselves back. We're here to, right, be our best to dominate. We're going to be okay. All right. So, the easiest thing you guys can do to prevent overwhelm and set yourself for success at the MCAT is to ask yourself this question. Is it the right time? Oh gosh. Oh gosh. I'm amazed. I'm not amazed. I mean, it's how a lot of people go through life, right? It's why people are the masses, right? We say, oh, the masses, the people, right? It's groupthink. So many people go through their pre-med career, go through their lives doing what they're told, doing what people say they need to do, right? Following the crowd, following the herd, and they don't think, wait a minute, does this work for me? And the MCAT is no exception. I can't tell you the number of students who said, oh, you know what? Everyone else taking the MCAT, so I just signed up, took the MCAT too. Oh, you know what? I was in a post-bac program, and they said that we should take the MCAT this time, that everyone's taking the MCAT this time, so I'm just going to take it at that time. And I'm like, well, did you feel even ready? No, I wasn't ready at all. But everyone was doing it, so I did it. And I'm like, how does that serve you? How does that help you? They fail to ask this question. Is this the right time, ... for me? Who hears me, who understands that? Is this the right time for the MCAT for me? Why wouldn't it be the right time? I like what Fayez said. Fasting for Ramadan, finals, and MCAT, I better reschedule. But people fail to do that. And the number one place I see this is people who want to rush the process, don't want a gap year. And so people are taking their MCAT, right, junior year. And you're transitioning from junior to senior year. So you've got a heavy science load weighing on you, 1. 2, you've got to get your senior thesis together. 3, you're trying to organize graduation, wrap up projects. 4, you've now ascended, you're the president of the club. 5, your research is you had to write that up this year, right? 6, you're preparing for graduation, and all the things you have to do to leave. 7, you're preparing for your application at the same time. So they lump all these things on themselves. All these things on themselves, not recognizing this is not the right time. And as AJ just said, right, this is the question I now want you to ask yourself. Are you rushing? Everyone did that don't rush challenge. I don't know what that was about. But too many students, too many pre-meds are in a rush. And I always say this, my students are going to be annoyed with me because I say this all the time in coaching, right? We sit down, we have pre-med coaching, and the room knows what's about to happen. When we all hear it, and I see all the faces on the Zoom go, because they know what's about to happen. Because a student will say something that indicates they are rushing. Student will say they are rushing. And I say, hey, what's the rush? You don't get bonus points. You can't call yourself a winner. You don't get a trophy for rushing to rejection. And some of you guys, are you rushing to rejection? Oh, I took the MCAT once upon a time. I did terribly, but give me a sticker for it. No one cares. So all you're rushing, are you rushing yourself right to a big, fat rejection? That's not success. Finishing the MCAT is not success. Doing well in the MCAT is success. Because we got to get into medical school. It's the purpose of the MCAT. So don't rush to rejection. And for the MCAT, you guys know the equation. What's the equation for MCAT success? It's Q times Q is your MCAT score. It's quality times the quantity. So we need to put in quality time, and we need to put in a quantity of time. And the quantity of that time is directly affected by the quality of the time you put in. And the quantity of the time you need is different for all of us based on the quality of the student we are and the quality of the student we have been before. So we all start with a different baseline, and then we all have different rates of how quickly we can elevate our baseline and maximize our score. So that quantity of time will vary. Okay? So it's quality of time times quantity of time. So when you ask yourself, is this the right time? Ask yourself, are there things in my life right now that will affect the quality of my study? Are there things in my life right now that will affect the quantity of time that I can put in for the MCAT? It's very, very simple. Ask yourself, is there something in my life? Boom. And then if there are things, ask yourself, can I come up with a plan, right? We identify, come up with a plan to reduce that thing's impact on the quality and the quantity of our study. And if we try to come up with a plan and we can't, or we come up with a plan and then we're not able to execute it when we start our studying, then we need to say that it is not the right time and we need to move our MCAT test date. Yes? Right now, as we're filming this, it's the end of April. I can't tell you how many students are just now starting to study for a June MCAT. So they're going to study for 6 weeks for a June MCAT because they know if I want to apply this year, I got to take my MCAT in like June. And so they're shrinking their MCAT study period. So they're shrinking the quantity of their time. They're also going to be simultaneously putting their application together and wrapping up their classes. So they're hurting the quality of their time. And so their Q and their Q are baby Qs. And so their MCAT score is going to be miserable. And so they are not asking themselves, is this the right time? Am I rushing? So you guys got to ask yourself that question. Yes? Does that make sense to everybody? Is this the right time? One of the things you can do to overcome this is have what I call a designated MCAT study period. So, We have one brain. And in order for us to function, everything we do requires some semblance of brain power. Okay? The amount of stuff that our brain is able to do in a day, okay, in a period of time, is the cognitive capacity that we possess. CC, cognitive capacity. Okay? The amount of work that we put onto our brain is called a cognitive load. So, the more things we have to do in a day, in a week, in a time period, adds a load, like a weight, onto our brain. And it takes up a portion of that cognitive capacity. So if you think of your brain as a pie, and until let's say there are 4 slices. If this is your brain here, right? No, we can't see that behind me there. Let me go up here. Whoop. I'll do it like this. Everybody can see that, right? All right, this is your brain. This is brain 1. We're gonna take a vote, so pay attention. This is brain 2. Okay. If brain 1 has 4 obligations, MCAT, application, they're taking classes, and they've got their senior thesis. Whereas brain 2 has MCAT and app. Okay? So brain 1 has 4 things drawing, right, placing a cognitive load on them and drawing from that capacity. So therefore, right, in this first case, the MCAT is only getting a quarter of the brain. In the second case, the MCAT is getting half the brain. Who's going to score better? This is an oversimplification, but it works perfectly. If brain 1 has 4 things and brain 2 only has 2 things, who has more brain power to apply towards the MCAT? Obviously brain 2, so whose score will be better? Brain 2. Yes, yes? So the reason that medical school admissions look at your disadvantaged status is because if you are a disadvantaged student, there are more things placed on you, more burdens placed on you. I was just talking to a medical student the other day, and he's trying to patch one of his mentees with me because his mentee was saying, basically, I'm trying to study, I'm trying to do all those kind of things, but I got to drive back to my parents' house to help them out every weekend. And I got bills to pay for them and blah, 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 and all those kind of things. And I'm like, okay, come talk to me, we'll figure out some efficiencies, whatever. But the whole point is these disadvantaged students have more things loading them down, so it makes it harder for them to perform at the same level. This is disadvantage on a slide for you guys, so you guys can see it. This is why medical schools have a sliding scale. If you're a disadvantaged student, we understand it's way harder for you to get a 3.8 GPA. So if you're a disadvantaged student and you have a 3.8 GPA, whew, that's way better than someone who's not disadvantaged with 3.8 GPA. So if we understand that premise, then it makes sense. If you have a lot of obligations, you are forcing yourself to work as a disadvantaged student through the MCAT process. For what? For why? Why put yourself at a disadvantage? And the reason this is a huge problem with MCAT Overwhelm is, let's go back to supply and demand. We have cognitive load, which is what's being placed on us. And we have cognitive capacity, which is what our brain can handle. When we amplify, this is actually a bad diagram. I'll draw it like this. This is our cognitive capacity. So this is how much brain power we have. Brain 1 that has 4 things, right, would be over here. Let's go back. Okay, does this make sense? When we talk about overwhelm, the reason this is the leading contributor to overwhelm is because we fail to recognize that we have allowed our cognitive load to exceed our cognitive capacity. And when that happens, that gap is overwhelm. So when you look at your schedule and you say, man, I've got 50,000 things to do, but I've got this amount of time, that gap is what? Overwhelm. So if you load yourself up with all these obligations, you don't take the time to say, is this the right time? Have I done everything I can to maximize Q and Q? You are immediately putting yourself at a disadvantage and immediately putting yourself at risk for overwhelm because your cognitive load will exceed your cognitive capacity. I use the word cognitive, but I could change the first word in all these, right? And we could go from cognitive capacity. We could talk about your energy level. We could talk about your focus, which all goes into cognition, right? We could talk about your time capacity, right? We could talk about your financial capacity. How about your emotional, personal capacity? All these things. So how many of you guys are upside down in one form of capacity or another? And you recognize now, if I were to ask you guys, right? So my people who are studying for the MCAT right now, who's studying for the MCAT right now? Comment right now. If you're studying for the MCAT, comment right now. As you guys comment, I also want to put this out there. As you comment, say, hey, I'm studying for the MCAT. Or let's say you guys are studying for your classes right now. How many of you guys can go down this list and say, oh my gosh, I've exceeded my blank capacity in one area or another? And how many of you guys can now say, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed because of that? This is, right? We've got to think about this. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know why. So much going on. No, it's obvious. If we take a second and we step back and we're critical and we analyze, it's obvious why we're overwhelmed. It's obvious. But we have to have a semblance of identifying what is going on. And so many of us skip that whole step. We don't even think about it. Because if we don't identify, we can't then plan and intervene. Armand, taking it this Friday. You got it, man. Okay. So we have to ask ourselves, is this the right time? Am I in balance? Have I maximized my capacity? Have I minimized my load elsewhere outside of the MCAT such that I can give my full attention to the MCAT and maximize the quality of my studying and the quantity of my study? Yes, yes. And Jessica says work takes priority sometimes. And I want to talk about this because we'll sidetrack here. Can I sidetrack for a second? Can we go off topic, on topic? I was just literally talking to a coworker about this today in the break room, right at the hospital. Another anesthesia attendant, and we were talking and we were discussing her husband. She's saying, "Yeah, my husband is miserable," and I just told him, "Finally, like you got to quit your job." And when we had this whole conversation about him quitting his job, she's telling the story. She's like, he said he couldn't quit because the job was depending on him, and he had to make the job a priority. And she tried to explain to him that job don't care about you. The only reason you worked that job, I thought, was so we could have money to support our family. But what good if that job is driving you to be so stressed that you can't enjoy the family? Then how good is that job? And on one of our pre-med coaching sessions, we have a real discussion with one of my students who said that exact thing. Work takes priority sometimes. And this student was saying, "Oh, but I make such good money." And then I had another student, right, a separate thing. "Oh, this research lab, they need me. It's my priority." And the question I would ask all of you guys, Jessica, who's working a job, said I prioritize work sometimes, is why are you working that job? Is that job your goal? Is that job your dream? Or is that job part of the mechanism to get you to your dream, your goal of becoming a doctor? And if becoming a doctor is your goal, is your dream, then how idiotic is it to prioritize work over getting your dream? Do you guys hear what I'm saying right now? If you're telling me that work takes priority, but you know that work is hurting your MCAT studying, you are choosing to walk away from your dream. In life, you can only have one priority. Only one thing can reign supreme. But too often, we get confused. We lose sight of what our real objective is. We don't have a true north, and therefore we can't make major moves towards that goal because we are disoriented. We are malaligned with our purpose, with our goal, with our dream. And for people who tell me this, oh, I got work priorities, I got research priorities, I'm telling you, I hear it all the time, guys. I'm not picking on you guys. But if I'm not here, I talk about perspective. If I can't be real with you, right? And I appreciate Jessica saying so true, gotta get the priorities straight. Because if I'm not here to tell you that, you're gonna keep lying to yourself and telling you that work is the priority. It's not. It's a means to an end. And if you sacrifice the end for the means, it don't matter. I have a student right now who just did amazing on the MCAT. And this student elected to couch surf. To couch surf and literally be without a home. Couch surf amongst friends and family, whatever, for multiple months because she knew she couldn't work and get the MCAT what it deserved. So she elected to sacrifice and be uncomfortable and sleep on a couch, right, for months at a time for the goal. That's the kind of sacrifice that people are out here making. So I'm not saying it's easy. Shoot. She would call me all the time crying. And we would talk it through. I'm saying, no, you're going to be all right. You're going to be all right. You're going to be all right. You got this. You got this. Hang on. And now she gets the score. Do you know how amazing she feels? Do you know the sigh of relief she breathed when she called me to let me know? And it was all that more sweet because she went through the sour. Right? What's my man Harpreet said? The tea is bitter before it's sweet or something like that. I forget exactly what the quote was he used. But that's the premise, guys. And if we aren't clear on our priorities, then we can't make that sacrifice. If you guys are ready to make sacrifices for your dreams, like the video right now. Comment right now. Let me know. Say, listen, put in the box, put sacrifice. Put my dream. Right? If it's really your dream, or is your dream to work at the student center? No, it ain't. Okay? So, priorities. And we get a little sidetracked, so we're over time. We're at 50 minutes. I was trying to do 30 minutes. We're at 50 minutes. So what we'll do is we'll do part one, part two. We'll do a couple of these, and we'll talk through different scenarios to get this for you guys. But is this helpful to people? Is this helpful for people? Are we learning? Are we getting some perspective? Are we understanding how to be more productive? We have to look at it this way, guys. We have to get clear. So for tonight, right, and like I said, we'll come back and we'll do more of these scenarios. Right now, today we only got two. Is it the right time? Gosh, I got all this stuff to talk about. But we did is the right time today. But what's important is, and you guys can take, and this is the importance of frameworks. So I teach in frameworks and systems, right? And then we have a framework, and then we bullet it down and get really specific on it. But for you guys who are worried about the MCAT, for you guys who are feeling overwhelmed, for you guys who are at this point, recognize that overwhelm comes from a discongruence between the demand of the exam and your ability to get at it. Something's going on. So we must identify what our issue is, our potential issues are. We must have plans, both prevention and intervention for said issues. And then we must execute to make sure that we're doing the right thing. Yes. All right, glad you made a live session, Nightline, okay? If you guys need help with your MCAT prep, like I said, I have a course called How to Dominate the MCAT without an expensive prep class. I'm going to put a link for a flash sale in the description box of this video after we finish up. $100 off. You can get into my course, and it literally is going to teach you all the ways that you can magnify the quality of your studying and the way that you can make sure you put in maximal time while still enjoying your studying and avoiding overwhelm. So, if you recognize you're having an issue and you're like, man, I'm sick of being overwhelmed and I want to flip and have my skill set, my strategies, the MCAT system that Dr. Pinesett has will put in place for me so that I'm always above what the demands of the exam are. No, Armand, send it to me again. Then you need to check out my MCAT course, guys. And I'm going to put a link in the box below. You can check it out, read the description of it, see what students are saying about it, right? See them in the box right now talking about greatest MCAT course ever made. You know it, right? I'll pull up these. Right? If you guys are trying to get better for your MCAT, it's an amazing, amazing opportunity, guys. Amazing, amazing opportunity. Yes, you can get the course now. All my courses, lifetime access, lifetime upgrades. I just upgraded the MCAT course last year. Okay? Lifetime access, lifetime upgrades. I'm actually currently in the process of upgrading the MCAT course even more right now. Okay? Yes, you should get in if you don't have it. All right? So, everybody, I thank you guys for coming with me live tonight. We're going to be live every Tuesday at 6 p.m. If you guys are enjoying this, please take the time, comment, let me know you're enjoying it. Okay? Take the time, send me a message. Take the time, tell a friend to come out. Let's grow this as an opportunity for people to get some positivity, some productivity, and some perspective on their Tuesday so they can be effective and powerful in their lives. I thank you guys so much for joining me live. If you're not catching this live, if you're catching this after the fact, you can still leave me a comment. Let me know that you enjoyed this, right? Share this on your social media. I would appreciate it. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, we have a podcast, y'all. Study Doc Show, Dominate Premed Show. We got 2 podcasts. If you're listening to this on the podcast, take a second. Leave a review for the podcast, right? Let people know it's a bomb podcast, okay? So people can get at it. And I thank you guys. I will see you guys next Tuesday, 6 p.m., same time, for some live action learning. Thank you guys very much. Have a great evening.